Hi friends, let's talk about the 10 signs of low vitamin D that you are missing. Now keep in mind, these signs are so non-specific and broad that they can represent many other issues, and that's why we're going to take a deep dive in the why and how low vitamin D changes your body. It's important to recognize these signs early so you can correct the levels ASAP. But when you overlook these signs and let your vitamin D drop too low, there can be irreversible changes to your immunity. Always talk to your medical doctor if you have any questions about these signs or vitamin D levels. Now, you will be surprised at several of these signs because they are so common and seemingly normal, but they are not. And if you ignore them, they could get even worse. So imagine waking up with a horrible total body itchy rash that no one could explain. That was me. I saw 6 doctors, and after 3 biopsies, countless blood work, and in the end, the only thing that was wrong was a low vitamin D level. However, looking back, I had all the telltale symptoms of vitamin D deficiency for years that I missed. If you watch this video until the end, you'll understand why it's a disservice that we don't recommend checking annual levels and giving appropriate supplementation for the entire human population. So number 1 is frequent common colds. Vitamin D is not a general immune booster, but it is a precision regulator of your immune system. And that distinction plays why low vitamin D is strongly associated to frequent colds, lingering infections, and exaggerated inflammation. The reality is vitamin D is in every single cell in your body, including in your nucleus. Many people don't realize that vitamin D turns on or off genes, especially for your innate immunity, that produces antimicrobial peptides such as defensins and cathelicidins. These molecules, they act like natural antibiotics at mucosal surfaces, the nose, the throat, the lungs, the gut, where germs first enter. Now, when vitamin D is low, your barrier response is weaker. This allows germs to replicate more easily before your other immune system, the adaptive immune system, can even kick in. So an adequate vitamin D level helps your immune cells recognize bad infected cells to quickly eliminate them to prevent the germs from spreading. I'm sure you've heard it's important to front load effort in life. So early containment by your body is one reason why people with sufficient vitamin D levels tend to get fewer colds. And when they do get sick, symptoms are often milder and shorter. And if you think about it, the reason why you even feel bad when you get a cold is because of excessive inflammation and immune overreaction. One of vitamin D's most important role is to calm your immune system, to calm excessive inflammation. It downregulates pro-inflammatory cytokines that make you feel bad while preserving pathogen-killing responses. So this reduces tissue damage like sore throats, chest tightness, prolonged coughing, and that knockdown feeling that people get when your cough lingers after you think that you're better. And when you have low vitamin D, your immune system is shifted towards an exaggerated, delayed inflammatory response. It also impairs your macrophages and dendritic cells, which then blunts your interferon signaling, which is important to squash germs. It weakens your mucosal immunity. Simply, you just get more colds in your upper respiratory tract, especially during winter when sunlight pretty much is so low that your vitamin D level drops significantly. So large randomized trials, vitamin D supplementation can reduce risk of acute respiratory infections with the strongest benefit in people who are deficient at baseline. So daily or near daily dosing often works better than large intermittent doses, especially for preventing colds. And if you just look at the clinical data, during wintertime, people's vitamin D levels go so low that they become deficient. And what goes up? Cold and flu season. So you're probably not just getting sicker because it's colder weather. You got shorter daylight. Then you got people indoor living. So you have reduced UVB exposure. This leads to widespread vitamin D deficiency in the winter months. But winter is all relative. Some people, they make their own winter all year long by staying indoors. And people who are most susceptible are children, older adults, those with darker skin, those who are obese, those who have diabetes or have autoimmune disease or frequent infections. That's a lot of people, folks. And these groups they often have both lower vitamin D levels and higher immune demand. But I'm sure you've tried taking vitamin D when you're sick and it doesn't seem to cure you. Yeah, that's right, because your immune system is supposed to cure you. When you take vitamin D, it's a tool to help your body do what it needs to do. It's a nutrient, just like zinc, to help you propel your immune system to work. So your body still needs to do the work. But if you get these tools before you actually get the challenge, maybe your body will work well enough so that you don't let the germs stay in your system. So vitamin D works best as immune preparation. It's not a rescue drug. And so daily supplementation before you get the active infection, it could help you shorten your illness immediately. But if you maintain adequate levels every day, it significantly reduces your infection burden and how severe infections can become. And I personally hate getting infections. I haven't gotten anything for over 5 years, which is pretty good considering how many times people have been infected in the last 5 years, right? And frankly, the reason why I don't like getting sick is because I run out of energy. And that brings us to symptom number 2, low energy or chronic fatigue. Now, come on, tell me the truth. Do you wake up every day refreshed, full of energy, ready to conquer the world? That's how I feel now. But that wasn't me back when I was vitamin D deficient. When I was bottomed out, I'd have to drag my butt out of bed every day and then force myself to stay awake during rounds. And now I'm bouncing down the hall pretty chipper when I'm working. And when I was a medical student, I really moved, I think, more like a sloth. I just thought I was just chronically tired because I was overworked and sleep deprived. And that's the problem with being human. There's so many different stressors in life that you don't know you are lacking nutrients. The reality is it's probably a combination of everything. So in order to have energy, you have to have healthy mitochondria, right? Mitochondria produces your energy like ATP. And if your mitochondria are sick or you don't have enough of them or they're just simply not efficient, it really won't matter what you're eating, whether it's carbs or fats or even protein. You're not going to convert that food into the energy that you need. So low levels of vitamin D are strongly associated with persistent fatigue that doesn't improve with rest and is often mislabeled as stress, depression, or poor sleep. And when you get up, what do? You comb your hair and then you feel a wad of hair coming out. So that's number 3, hair loss. People don't realize it takes a lot of energy to make hair. It is an elective thing for your body because you don't really need hair to survive, right? It looks good, each of us to tell us apart from one another, but we can wear clothes or a wig. And as I mentioned before, vitamin D is used for every single cell in your body, and your hair is going to be the last cell to get fed. It's going to get leftovers if there's any left over. And that's why people who are stressed, whether it's mental stress or actual physical stress from being ill or, like getting a cold or getting cancer or on chemotherapy, what happens first? They tend to lose their hair. But take a look at this guy. This is a nocturnal rat. He literally has no hair. He's pale, kind of looks sickly, right? Guess what? He doesn't have any vitamin D. He doesn't actually need it. God made naked mole rats pretty special that they don't need vitamin D to live long. And they also don't need hair. They're actually blind. So they don't need hair to identify themselves, right? They don't know if they look good or not. And I assume they don't mind being bald. Even though this guy is bald, he can still outlive all his rat cousins by 30 years. Scientists are so impressed that they are intensely studying the naked rat mole for longevity. So if your goal is to live 30 years, then, it doesn't really matter if you have enough vitamin D, right? But if you want to achieve longevity and not be bald, you're going to need an adequate amount of vitamin D every day. Now, I don't know why I had to wait until I was sick before I found out that I did not have an adequate amount of vitamin D. And when I was a medical student, they required that I check my blood work for hepatitis and tuberculosis because they were considered occupational hazards. And during that time, it would have been so easy to check my vitamin D level because vitamin D deficiency is an occupational hazard. I had a single-digit vitamin D number. Do you know why? Because I was spending 110 hours working under fluorescent light in the hospital since medical school. Basically, I was living as naked mole rats because of my job, which I've been doing now for nearly 3 decades. And I bet you're probably not much better off. You're either stuck in your home with LED lights or stuck in your office with LED lights. It's probably a combination of both. Unfortunately, unlike naked mole rats, there's no longevity benefit associated with not seeing the sun for people or with vitamin D deficiency. And if you stay vitamin D deficient, you too may one day look like a naked mole rat, lose your hair, and look sickly and feel not only tired, but also weak. And that brings us to number 4, difficulty climbing stairs or muscle weakness or heaviness or fatigue in your muscles. Your muscle is packed with mitochondria because it needs that energy machine to power you to run away from danger immediately, right? Muscles also hold your body up. It's not just your bones. If you have no muscle, you won't be able to stand up or even sit up straight. It is the most underappreciated organ that people just assume they will always have until one day they don't. And there are some people who can't even balance on their feet after one day of being bedbound. And they also can't swallow without coughing. They're aspirating. Not doing anything makes your muscles shrink even faster because by the time you are 30, your muscles shrink every day, especially if you don't work out. So if you have vitamin D deficiency, it will shrink even faster, especially if you do nothing. The good news is you can train your muscles. You can do something and it will grow bigger and stronger. That's why bodybuilders look the way they do. They have a lot of muscles because they spend purposeful time doing purposeful movements to train them. They stress their muscles, which increases the number of mitochondria in the muscles, as well as their efficiency to produce energy for your body. And this in turn increases your metabolic rate, uses up the energy that you eat from starches and fats and protein. And this is all orchestrated through vitamin D, which directly regulates muscle fiber function, especially fast twitching fibers needed for balance and strength. Now, which brings us to sign number 5, falls or tripping. Deficiency often causes proximal muscle weakness. Those are muscles closest to your body. Those are your core muscles, which helps you balance, helps you walk, helps you climb stairs, and helps you get up from a chair or lift objects. And that's why after a C-section or a hernia repair, they tell you not to lift objects, right? Well, when you have a weak core, you can't lift your legs up. In my 30s, I began tripping as I was jogging, literally rolling on the asphalt. I almost kissed the asphalt once. And it turned out I was shuffling my gait, not picking up my feet high enough and tripping over step-offs in the cement. And that's because I had weak core muscles, even though I was jogging every day. And I wouldn't have realized my muscles were so weak until I fell. And I didn't just fall once, I fell like 3 times over the course of 2 years. Luckily, I don't have osteoporosis, so I got a bit scratched up on my skin, but I didn't seriously injure myself. And after the 3rd time, I finally thought about it and analyzed why I was falling. So I started to change my exercise routine and work on my core. For some reason before that, I thought jogging was a perfect exercise. I moved a lot of different muscles. However, the reality is the human body has about 650 different skeletal muscles, and jogging only activates about 200. That's like a third. There's still lots of muscles that are not being activated, even though you feel like you're moving. And that's not enough for healthy aging.
Hi, friends. I am so thrilled that you want to take charge of your health and take charge of your food. Now, I know nutrition can be complex, but it doesn't have to be. And I'm here to support you in this lifelong journey. So if you point your camera app to this QR code, it'll take you to a link for a free handout that I created just for you. And if you like it, if you want to see other handouts, please go to the link in my show notes and then you can leave me your feedback on what I could do to help you in your journey. Okay, back to the video now.
Heard of the term gym rat? In America, people pay to get locked up in a room to stare at a wall while running on a machine, kind of like a hamster running on a hamster wheel in a cage, right? That's what the term means. But people who live in longevity countries, they don't buy memberships to exercise gyms. They build exercise into their everyday routine, like climbing hills in Sardinia till they see their neighbors. That activates 300 stability muscles, 100 more than just jogging. And if you live in smaller cities in China, they are squatting while they potty, which activates 200 core muscles for balance. Those are longevity things to do. So are you walking up hills, climbing stairs, or squatting on a daily basis? I've been trying to do all of that by finding hills to walk in my neighborhood, and I also squat at home to clean the floor. But when I was young, I didn't do those movements. But even if you're a proud gym rat, if you're vitamin D deficient, your muscles are still going to be weak and you'll get fatigued more easily. That limits how much muscle you can build. And honestly, as a medical student and resident, I didn't put 2 and 2 together. I was chronically tired and on a seafood diet. I saw food and I ate it. And you would be surprised at what medical students and interns and residents eat in hospitals. Have you seen hospital food? At least in America, most hospitals don't take pride in serving healing food. They serve people what people want to eat. So if you want to eat 3 servings of bacon with 3 servings of ice cream and a Coke for breakfast, you can order that from your hospital bed. They'll give it to you. And people wonder why they come in for one thing and get complications. Unfortunately, most foods are unreliable sources of vitamin D. And if you want to get enough vitamin D, it's really best just to take a supplement. Living in a location that's setting doesn't help if you never get to see the sun. And during that time, I found it difficult to lift weights. And now I know why, because vitamin D deficiency or inadequacy just simply made my muscles weaker. And at the cellular level, vitamin D, it works through vitamin D receptors, which is present not only in the nucleus, but also closely associated with mitochondria-rich tissues, such as your muscle, your brain, your immune cells, and your heart, which is, by the way, another muscle. And when vitamin D binds to the vitamin D receptor, it influences expression of genes involved in mitochondrial biogenesis, meaning the creation of new, healthy mitochondria. So low vitamin D leads to fewer and less efficient mitochondria, which translates into lower ATP production. And that means lower muscle growth. And your mitochondria has to give your muscle energy for it to move. Vitamin D helps mitochondria burn fuel more efficiently. And adequate vitamin D supports oxidative phosphorylation, the process by which your food gets converted by the mitochondria into ATP energy. And when your vitamin D is low, the electrons from the electron transfer chain leak, increasing reactive oxygen species. And this creates oxidative stress, which damages mitochondrial membrane. Then that makes it even more inefficient, and it causes inflammation, which brings us to problem number 6, high blood sugars. Approximately 50 to 80% of people with type 2 diabetes have vitamin D deficiency or inefficiency, depending on the population studied and the cutoff that they're using. Now, you could imagine that theoretically, it can contribute to making your blood sugars go even higher. And there's so many reasons why a person with diabetes could also be vitamin D deficient. It's really several mechanisms stacking on together. So vitamin D, number 1, is sequestered in the fat tissue. So it's trapped in fat. So if you're overweight, that means that you have lower levels of circulating vitamin D. Then that fat causes chronic inflammation, and chronic inflammation increases vitamin D utilization. And oftentimes people with diabetes have kidney disease. That's really common, and you need your kidneys to activate vitamin D. And then people don't want to go outdoors, right? So they have less muscle mass. That further worsens your level, right? Because then you don't increase your mitochondria. So this deficiency is both a risk factor for developing diabetes and a consequence of having diabetes. When the deficiency is more severe, it's associated with worse insulin resistance, higher hemoglobin A1C levels, and increased need for medications, more complications such as neuropathy and cardiovascular disease. On the other hand, people with well-controlled diabetes, they tend to have higher vitamin D levels than those who have poorly controlled disease. And far too many people think that because they feel fine and everything seems to be working out, that everything should be normal inside of them. But unfortunately, if you're not paying attention to your vitamin D level, your muscles can only recover so fast after you challenge them, and your bones will only build so much. And obviously, muscle is very important for bone growth because astronauts have to work a lot harder in order to preserve their bone mass when they're out in space. And by the time you have bony changes, that's already kind of late in the game. However, you may have number 7, bone pain or deep body aches. Now, vitamin D is required for calcium absorption and bone mineralization. So when levels are so low, calcium is often pulled from the bone to keep blood levels stable. And this leads to dull, deep pain in your hips, your lower back, your ribs, and your legs that is often mistaken for arthritis or getting old. Now, there's also a strong interaction between vitamin D and mitochondrial calcium handling. And calcium is not just for your bones. Mitochondria uses small amounts of calcium, pulse and regulate ATP synthesis. And when you don't have enough vitamin D, it disrupts your calcium balance. This can lead to either underpowered energy production or mitochondrial overload, both of which impair cell function and increase fatigue. And number 8 is skin rashes or inflammatory issues of your skin, like what I had when I was vitamin D deficient. That may be your first clue because the skin cells turn over very rapidly. Rashes Rashes, dry skin, itching, or delayed healing can all appear long before you fracture a bone or abnormal bone scans. Vitamin D plays a central role in skin health because the skin is both a producer and a target organ for vitamin D. So many skin problems that look unrelated, rashes, eczema, slow healing, flares of psoriasis, frequent infections, they really share the same underlying issue: impaired skin immunity and impaired barrier function driven by low vitamin D signaling. So when you touch your skin, you're touching keratin, and vitamin D regulates keratinocytes that make keratin, which determines how well the outer skin layer forms a tight protective barrier. Now, when vitamin D is low, the skin barrier becomes weak and fragile, and this will allow irritants, allergens, and even germs to penetrate more easily, triggering inflammation, infection, itching, redness, and chronic rashes. So if you have an itchy, dry patch on your skin, you probably have eczema, and low vitamin D is strongly associated with eczema severity. Vitamin D helps to calm overactive immune responses in the skin while supporting antimicrobial defenses. And when you don't have enough vitamin D, it shifts your immune system toward an allergic and inflammatory state, increasing flare frequency, how dry your skin is, and your skin sensitivity. And when you have scaly skin, that may be psoriasis, which is characterized by excessive rapid skin cell growth. And vitamin D, it normally acts as a brake on this process. And when levels are low, your keratinocytes make keratin uncontrollably. This leads to thickened plaques and scaling. And this is why topical vitamin D analogs are often a standard of therapy for psoriasis care. So if you're struggling with acne or skin infections, that may be because your skin is unable to produce antimicrobial peptides such as cathelicidin, which protects against bacteria, fungi, and viruses on the skin. You really need vitamin D to produce these peptides. Now, deficiency weakens this first-line defense, your innate immune system, increasing susceptibility to recurrent skin infections, folliculitis, or inflammatory acne. If you're one of those people who have thin skin and struggle to heal well, you may be vitamin D deficient, because slow wound healing and fragile skin is a telltale sign of vitamin D inadequacy, because vitamin D supports collagen formation, angiogenesis, and immune coordination for wound repair. So if you don't have enough, you don't get to heal. And you also won't heal well. You'll form scars. So after a procedure, a surgery, a cut, you'll be at high risk of getting infections, especially if you're older and have diabetes. So when you have an unexplained generalized rash like me, the first thing everybody thinks about is an autoimmune disease. And guess what? When you're low in vitamin D, you're at high risk of getting an autoimmune disease, which is number 9. The good news is daily vitamin D has been shown to reduce the rate of getting all autoimmune diseases, even if you're not deficient. This is why prevention is powerful. This just means our definition of deficiency or insufficiency is really not accurate. The RDA does not change its recommendation based on your changing daily needs. Frankly, there's no way that your body requires the same amount of nutrients every day unless you're a vegetable in bed living in an aseptic bubble with no stressors in life. If you have any kind of stressor, whether you're sick fighting infection, whether you have anxiety, or you have a urinary tract infection, a cold, or decide to run a marathon or go to Disneyland, or just chasing your toddler for an entire day, all those activities will require more nutrients than you just sleeping in bed. That means you'll require more vitamin D. However, the most common sign of vitamin D deficiency or inadequacy is nothing. That's number 10. All of these changes that I've been talking about can happen to people with or without vitamin D deficiency. And that's one reason why people don't recognize them as a sign of vitamin D problems. 70% of the American population are low in vitamin D, and they don't even know it. And certain groups are at higher risk. I've already named many of them. Vitamin D is complex. You not only have to make it, if you eat it, you have to absorb it, and then you have to activate it. And it requires multiple body parts. So we're rapidly converting our society from outdoor work to indoor work, eliminating vitamin D. And then we tell everybody to put sunblock on when they go outside. They barely spend any time outdoors. Well, they're not getting vitamin D if they block UV light. And anyone who works indoors and goes full covered clothing with sunscreen outdoors, they're going to get far less vitamin D in their skin when they do go outdoors. Living at higher latitudes further reduces UVB exposure, especially during fall and winter. And genetically, we are made differently. So if you have darker skin, you have more melanin. Higher melanin levels reduce your skin's ability to make vitamin D from sunlight. So this means you got to stand out in the sun longer than a person who's lighter skin to make the same amount of vitamin D. So this increases your risk of deficiency even on sunny days. And as you age, your skin produces significantly less vitamin D from the same sunlight that you got when you were younger. And in addition, your kidney function declines with age, so that reduces the amount of active vitamin D that it can help you with. And you're also probably not spending as much time outdoors because you're not moving as much. And as I mentioned previously, if you have a lot of fat on your body, that fat traps vitamin D. So your blood levels are even lower than your total body vitamin D stores. This leaves you vitamin D inadequate or deficient because it's not available for your organs and cells. And if you're taking a supplement, you may not be absorbing that vitamin D. So if you have inflammatory bowel disease, celiac or bariatric surgery, or chronic pancreatitis or low bile, you have impaired vitamin D absorption. You need fat to absorb vitamin D. So this means if you're eating a low-fat diet, you may have a similar problem. Now, hence the value of checking a vitamin D level. And then when you take a vitamin D or you make vitamin D, it needs to be first activated in the liver and then it goes to the kidneys. So fatty liver disease, cirrhosis, chronic kidney disease, it all results in functional vitamin D deficiency or an inadequacy, even if you're absorbing enough or even if you're out in the sunlight enough. And if you have a chronic inflammatory state, that increases your use of vitamin D and its breakdown. Your immune system consumes vitamin D as a part of the immune regulation. So if it's using it up, then you have less circulating levels for other cells. And if you're in a special state, let's say you're pregnant or lactating, well, you also will require more vitamin D, especially if you're not getting enough sunlight. And did I mention medications interfere with vitamin D? Steroids, seizure meds, antifungals, HIV medications, and some weight loss drugs, they can interfere with vitamin D metabolism or absorption. And if you have diabetes and metabolic syndrome, insulin resistance, obesity, kidney stress, inflammation, yeah, those things all lower vitamin D levels. All those people are at high risk of having low vitamin D levels. So if you have low levels, how do you know how much to take? Well, that depends on how low your levels are. And that depends on a blood level of vitamin D. So the RDA recommends that all adults should consume over 600 to 800 international units of vitamin D3 daily. And in the US, most people get it from fortified milks, from dairy to plant sources. And of course, there are other sources like salmon and fortified yogurts. But if you take it to pill supplement, then that depends on your level. So if your vitamin D blood level is less than 12 nanograms per milliliter, your doctor will most likely want to tank you up, give you 25,000 to 50,000 international units every week. And that probably takes about 6 to 8 weeks. And then at that time, he may convert you to 800 international units daily to take every day. And if your vitamin D level is between 12 to less than 20 nanograms per milliliter, they probably will recommend that you take 800 to 1,000 international units. And if your levels are above 20, but lower than 30 nanograms per milliliter, they may recommend 600 to 800 international units of vitamin D2. But if you have malabsorption problems, high doses of vitamin D may be necessary. And theoretically, if you have vitamin D in excess above 70 nanograms per milliliters of 25-hydroxy vitamin D, you may have noticeable high calcium in your blood and high calcium in your urine called hypercalcemia and hypercalcinuria. However, in reality, toxicity signs are unlikely to be evident at levels that are less than 140 nanograms per milliliter. And the safe upper limit of vitamin D is defined as 4,000 international units a day. But vitamin D can't work alone. You need an adequate amount of magnesium. So if you want to learn more about that, watch the next video.